Hello, this is Joymay's channel. April 5th is the Qingming Festival in China. I happened to see such an article by Mr. Zhou Guoping, and I also shared my self-study with you. The title is When You Look at Death This Way, You Can Live a Peaceful Life. I have often observed that very young children show confusion, fear, and concern about death. No matter how careful adults are to avoid it, it is impossible to keep this matter from children for a long time. Children can always understand the horror of this matter from the increasing information, from the daily language, and even from the taboo attitudes of adults later. He may not say it, but the earthquake of the heart is still quietly happening beneath the surface. Faced with this kind of question, the usual practice of adults is to ignore it, block it, and tell children not to think about it. And given a simple answer, which must be a lie. In my opinion, all three are the worst. The right thing to do is to encourage the child to discuss it with him and come up with some possible answers, but be sure not to draw conclusions. Keeping a child brave and open-minded about life's most important and confusing issues from an early age is sure to benefit and help grow a fundamental honesty in his soul. Time brings different gifts to different people, and the same for all. It then takes away everything, good or bad. We are so used to being alive that we are so used to it that it's hard to imagine that we will lose it one day. But in fact, death is always by our side, and it comes to us as easily as a labor clock on the door. Therefore, many philosophers have argued that we should also get used to death as soon as possible. Let we be caught off guard. In this sense, they see philosophy as an exercise in thinking about death and making themselves accustomed to it. Death is inherently alone and impossible to walk in company. We live in the world with others, but death absolutely separates us from the world and others. In the eyes of the dying person, the world no longer belonging to him, and the life and death of others have nothing to do with him. He stood on his own exit from life to death, where he was alone, and the other dying people were also at their existence. No, not with him. Death is always one's own business. There are as many unique deaths as there are self in the world. There is no one death that is common to all. The so-called nothingness after death is nothing but the absolute destruction of this unique self, and there is no destination for everyone. Without death, there is no love and passion, no adventure and tragedy, no joy and pain, no charm of life. In short, without death, there is no meaning of life. Death, which ultimately deprives life of its meaning, once again gave life its meaning. However, the desire to take first to give is ultimately deprived. Thought about death is futile. It is not meaningless. It is a meaningful futility. Its significance is many as follows. First, it enables people to see the panorama and limits of life, and to see the success or failure of the world with a detached perspective. Second, prepare mentally for actual death. Third, death is always one's own death. Thinking about death makes people more soberly aware of the irreplaceability of personal existence. So, as Heidegger said, to be dead, to cherish life based on death, maximize its unique value. As long as a person thinks about death seriously, no matter whether he obtained a satisfactory result or not, he seems to have surveyed the boundaries of life and seen the panorama and the limits of life. In this way, he will form an open-minded, and he can also jump out and examine it when he is ups and downs in the world. Although he still has his own pursuits, he will not regard success and failure as too important. He is aware of the relative nature of all happiness and suffering, so that he will not get carried away when he is happy, and he will not lose his temper when he is suffering. Another benefit of thinking about death is that it prepares us to be ready to die tomorrow without being alarmed or aggrieved. Although I never admit that death is acceptable, I still agree with many sages that since death will come sooner or later, it doesn't matter if it comes sooner or later. It's all the same thing in the end. In my opinion, all we should and can do is not to be afraid of death in this sense. In the face of eternal death, all finite lifespans are equal. If a man can see through the meaninglessness of life, he will do his best to gain freedom from death. He may still fear death in the metaphysical sense, stillness and nothingness, but he has overcome to a considerable extent the fear of death in everyday life. His concrete death caused by disease or disaster. Today I live, and tomorrow I will die. So I will cling to life, love myself, cherish today, and live an intense life. Today I live, and tomorrow I will die. I want to transcend life, to break the ego, to tolerate today, to live a quiet life. No living person can penetrate the mystery of the afterlife. In my opinion, a philosopher is a philosopher, not because he believes that the soul is immortal, but because whether the soul is immortal or not, he still regards the life of the soul as the only eternal value in life, and determines his own way of life accordingly. Have a detached attitude towards the passing world life. It is said that dying people tend to forgive anything. I think this is not because of his sound conscience, but because in the face of absolute nothingness, all trivial past events really don't matter to him. To truly solve the problem of death spiritually, we cannot just persuade people to accept the non-existent rationally, but help people to see the boundary between existence and the non-existence. Without the boundary, death would, of course, not be a problem. This is a line of thought of religion and of religiously inclined philosophers. Among them, Christianity and Buddhism have important differences. Christianity claims that the soul is immortal, and after the death of the body, the soul escapes the bondage of the body and ascends to the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, both life and death are existence, and life is a low-level existence, and death is a high-level existence. On the contrary, Buddhism maintains that all four elements are empty and life is only an illusion, and one should be freed from the illusion, cut off samsara, and return to complete emptiness. Therefore, both life and death are lossless, and life is a low-level lossless, and death is a high-level lossless. Ordinary people live in the world with various expectations and plans for the future, and are busy with them. However, if a person realizes that death is close at hand, he will understand that the expected future may not exist. The only thing that can be grasped is the present. In fact, everyone can suddenly encounter a day without tomorrow. However, people in the world often devote all their energy to the unreliable tomorrow but sacrifice today as the means. Time flies like an arrow, and life is easy to get old. It is really the most happiness thing, which has caused so many laments. Of course, pretending to be confused is not a good idea, and in fact, it is difficult to do. However, many times we are not pretending to be confused, but really confused, living in front of our eyes, attracted by concrete life, forgetting the passage of time and the coming of death. This is the magic of life itself. With all tragic events, including our own death, we are always adaptable and misfits, sometimes pessimistic and optimistic, awake and alarmed until the end. In the final analysis, people's endurance and adaptability are amazing, and they can live in almost any situation or die. And death is not intolerable and adaptable. When you die, you get used to it. If you don't adapt, you can't do anything. If you don't adapt, and you die. If you don't adapt. In fact, it is precisely when a person is about to leave the world that he is most likely to have a very valuable exchange with the world. This spiritual communication at the moment of death has an almost divine quality. A person is likely to gain a different perspective in the face of the deadline, more real and detached than usual. Of course, the premise is that he is not completely defeated by death and can still think lively. Some people are able to do this with their own inner strength. As far as the whole society is concerned, in order for more people to do this, it is necessary to change the bad habit of silently speaking about death and form a healthy atmosphere in which the living and the dying can face death calmly. In such an atmosphere, the deceased no longer has nothing to do but wait to die, but can do the last meaningful thing in his life, which is to become a philosopher. No matter what a person's occupation is, the final stage of his life should be a philosopher stage. Thank you listening.